What are you guys doing here? Good afternoon. Greetings. Hello. Hi. What's going on? No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I know the topic is seemingly serious, but we don't have to be serious. My name is Koketso Sachane. I need to first say thank you to Open Book Festival for once again inviting me and allowing me to engage with incredible work and incredible people. The session for this afternoon, Surviving Masculinity, changing the narrative. And I was saying to the brothers that we need to, as a start, explore the topic, and I'm questioning the topic itself, to be honest. But firstly, let me introduce these brothers. I have for, I think, over a month been immersed in their work in many different ways. And I'm glad to have met them in person today, met the individuals behind the work, and I look forward to this conversation. Firstly, Sipho Banda, author of A Crowded, Lonely Walk. Please remember to go and get all these books. So if you can please welcome the dear brother Sipho Banda.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And then I referred to him earlier on as he's teaching us. We're learning a lot. It felt like I'm at school, but in a very familiar way through this work. Writers Deathscape, Hugo Canham, please welcome Bro Hugo. And then Ramoholo, I said, that's how I addressed him earlier on, author of the book 3-Egg Dilemma, Canham and Morabo Morojele. I think as a start, when I looked at the topic, I had a couple of questions, and I am, as a start, just questioning the topic itself. Surviving masculinity, changing the narrative. I sat and I pondered on, and this is where I would like the three of you gentlemen to engage, questioning the idea of surviving masculinity. What is the idea of what masculinity is, and is it something to survive? And changing the narrative from what to what. I think that's what I've sat with while reading your work, while also pondering ahead of today. So, Babu Banda, your reflections on the topic itself, your thoughts.
Yeah, greetings everybody, as well as my colleagues here on the panel. I don't know if you can hear me properly.
We know you're soft-spoken.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yes, especially when you're talking about masculinity. Yes, I'm a soft-spoken person. Yes, yeah. No, according to my understanding, or the way I describe it, masculinity, it's something that you see right now here, you know. Yeah. If you are looking at us here, only the men, it's one of the ways that you can describe the masculinity. It is whereby the men dominate in all or most of the fields, thinking that everything is about themselves. So it has that man characterization. Is either at the place of work, at home, culturally, but as the question says, how can we survive it? Then I hope that on this discussion, we will be able to go through that and find a common point, a common decision to go through with this topic. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Hugo?
So on the topic itself.
Yes.
So I've been wondering and debating about my presence and contribution to it, because it's not, I don't sign up to being a defender of masculinity or even a prescription of what it should look like. In fact, my own personal position is to be on the run from masculinity. So I arrive, and there's a predefined pathway about what that should look like. Real men, particular ways of being masculine, and my position is to perpetually be on the run, and not to arrive at femininity, but for a boundlessness. I aspire to boundless ways of being that are not located within particular kinds of categorizations, even as they are given to me. Yeah.
Just on that, is it on the run? Is it a rejection of, or is it more about, as you said, boundless?
It's so I'm not invested in masculinity and masculinities as such. So so being on the run, maybe to reject it, maybe too strong, but it's certainly not the place where I'm comfortable and happy for the things that it often represents and for the limitations that it puts around me.
Yeah, a very difficult one. I think as Sipho said, there's so much about our culture that binds us, that locks us as men into being, that defines us as men. And as men, we are also very conscious of what men have done, what they do, and what they can be. And therefore, I think your term is very interesting and a useful one, that you're running away from it. Because there's a lot of shame associated with masculinity. But at the same time, it's something, whilst we must run away from elements of it, I think there's also a pride which we must live as males and in our masculinity. So it's in a sense, it's almost a double-edged sword. At one level, there's a sense that, men can be characterized as these brutal creatures. But the same, and for that, and it's true, because I mean, the things that we do, particularly to women and very often to children as well, are horrific. But at the same time, we have responsibilities that are not about patriarchy, that are not about sort of an assumed leadership just by the fact of being males. So for me, it's a difficult one. What is masculinity? Should we, and what is the opposite of it? It's not femininity. I think, for a man, that wouldn't be the, although of course, nowadays we talk about, identities, we talk about multiple identities and flexing identities. So for me, it's a very difficult question. How do we survive it? Firstly, how do we define it? And is it cast in stone? Is there one definition of it? Are there individual definitions of it? And so on and so forth. And by surviving it, I'm not sure what we mean by that. Do we mean how we live as men? Or how we're supposed to live as men? I don't know.
I must, and I should have said this at the beginning, what I prefer when it comes to these sessions, and I know the rules are, I'm supposed to keep track of time and 15 minutes before allow for questions and answers, but please feel free at any point. And I suppose I'm throwing it to you as well, because there's something about the subject or even the authors that had you come here as well. So if you also have reflections or thoughts around the topic itself, the subject matter, please feel free at any point to put your hand up. And all I'm saying is this is a cipher, and it's not just about us, it's about you as well. So at any point, please feel free. I don't want to labor the point, all right? Because again, like you said, if we first need to define and then question the surviving of masculinity itself. And in your work, there are, in many different ways, you have masculine energy, you have gender dynamics within your work. And I want to start with you, Sipho. There's a particular piece that I want to maybe let you read.
Which one?
I must just jump to it real quick because I think it allows for us to, again, in exploring masculinity, but questioning the relationship between masculinity and vulnerability, right? Maybe 47?
Page 47.
Yeah. It's called A Little Too Late.
Page 47. Oh, yes.
Go
Wait
ahead.
for it.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Unless you want my deep radio voice to do it.
Okay, thank you. I'm on page 47. If everybody has a copy right now, they should have been...
Yeah, go to page 47.
Yeah. Can we allow all of them to go back then buy some copies then?
You're trying to buy time. Read the thing, Chief.
Okay, the topic is a little too late. My name is on the list. There is no ink to erase it. I have to face the court beast, and it surely cannot run away. I can smell a jail and a death sentence, but will surrender and bow low. Rather be a sinner than a saint in pretense. I will not live against the law of love. I confess in silence that I love you. I did not tell you as nothing compelled me, even though you do not have love for me in you. Mine is enough to love both of us. In this court of love, it is a little too late to lie. In loving you, let me be hanged and freely die. Thank you. Yeah.
The reason why I wanted to go there, again, the supposed energy or the supposed idea of being a man or exuding supposed masculine energy is that we're not vulnerable. We're not able to speak of love or feel love or write of love. For you, I mean, and love is present in many different ways in your work, but I want to talk a bit more about that piece and the vulnerability that is there in expression of love.
Yeah, even if you look at the Bible, I don't know which book, I don't know which verse, but it's there. It tells the women, or the man to love the woman or his wife, then the wife to respect the woman, you know. It says something different or something like that. But coming back to this a poem, you know, there are some of the things when it comes to masculinity, the way I look at it, it also kills the men themselves, not only the women. Yes, it can affect the women, but the men themselves. You know, when we grow up, as I grow up in deep rural areas, you find out everybody's not sure, because we used to close the gates at night. It's not sure whether the gate is closed or whatever. Then the father at home or the mother will say that, can someone please go and check if the gate is locked or closed or whatever, you know? If a female child stand up wanting to go and check the gate, they will say, no. A girl must not be outside at this time. You, as a male or as a boy, you then have to go. No matter how frigid the night is, no matter how afraid you are, it seems as if a man is something who's not afraid of anything. It seems as if we are not made up of flesh, as if we do not have blood, you know.
Yeah.
So yes, you can be afraid, But because they've said that it should be a man who must be go out at this time of the day,
Yeah.
then you go out and check. Actually, or maybe at that moment, you will be afraid. But just they have said that it's a man who must go outside there.
Yeah.
Then you go, yes.
Ramholo, if I can just come to you, because in the three-egg dilemma is set in a unidentified place, even though some people have assigned a particular country. And it's also life happening within the backdrop or as a consequence or being influenced by a civil war, right? And I want to stay with the vulnerability part because the main character, Egg, the parts where I saw a degree of vulnerability, an expression of love, is when he speaks of the son and that the only person that he chose to love is the son. And that was one of very few moments where there is that expression of love itself within the context of the chaos and also the violent, somewhat person that he is.
Yeah. That's the only person I chose to love. Do we choose? Well, apart from, I think, from our parents and our siblings, I think we choose to love people. Whether we are men, male or female, we choose to love. We choose to invest in people. And I think, and therefore, I don't know, because love is such a evasive thing, such a difficult thing to get a handle on. Because, I suppose because in this book it is so unfulfilled. And love, in a sense, the difficulty about love is particularly that it is so often unfulfilled. Or, but nevertheless, I think, rightly as you were trying to express in Sipho, this whole notion of masculinity means, therefore, that as a man you cannot express that your loss, your sadness, your lack of fulfillment, your lack of love. And therefore, that character in the book, and ironically, that child, in the end, is not the narrator's child.
Right.
Which is, in a sense, is a double, what shall I call it? Right? It's a double blow to him. One, he chose to love this person, then subsequently discovers that the child is not his. So I think the book is very pessimistic. So don't buy it.
I don't know about that.
Don't buy it.
Hugo, there is the presence of love in, and honestly, I'm still taking my time because the amount of work and what one is understanding in what you're sharing with us has got so many layers. It's an education. I'm learning through it, right? The love that I have noted is firstly the love of who you are and where you come from and your mother's people, your people. And then there's love of your country and your people and your culture, right? And the presence of love in cultural practices, love in the community, you teach us a lot about Mpondo culture and the presence of love within that, in the work that is, in how you are, in the culture, in your people, in the setting as well. Please.
Yeah. So yeah, I've never thought of love in that sense, but yes, it's the motivation sometimes for even writing. Yeah, because it's a commitment and a sustained thought process about something that's from a place of love. I want to, if I may be just a little disobedient and think, because as this conversation was starting, I was thinking of a place, where do I actually write about men specifically, given that this is a masculinities?
Don't go to my follow-up question, because I've got an answer to that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, but feel free.
Yeah. So I write about the SS Mendi, which many people have written about, right? The sinking of the ship. And I go to the famous sinking imagined that here's the ship tilting, about to go down into the water. And on that ship, as we know, were many black soldiers who were not really going to fight, but they were going to build stuff in Europe, and many of them ended up in France. Well, those who lived. So on that tilting ship, I imagine queer sociality among these people who had been on the ship departing from Cape Town in February, I think it was, had been on it maybe just over a month or so. And think about the relationships that had formed, which are not necessarily sexual, but there are possibilities of them too, right? And we know this from many writers writing about the mining compounds, about men who are enclosed together, compelled to be together, and the relations that form between them. So I in some ways, thinking about it, kind of destabilize what has been termed black valor, right? Valor, is that how you pronounce it? Valor. Valor. Right, which is meant to be read in very particular ways of dominant masculinities, men at war. But if you think about the everyday, the mundane repetition of sharing space together and the socialities that form between people, to decenter this valor in ways that enable and generate care of different possibilities in a historical moment, to just rethink what we have come to understand to be masculinity. Yeah.
For me, very interesting.
Go ahead, please.
It's very interesting that this is supposed to be about masculinity, but we spent a lot of time talking about love. And I think that's revealing. But anyway, sorry, go on.
It's me, my guy. It's me. No, but you're right, though. Because I think sometimes we can also get too academic in this whole discussion around masculinity. And we're also living in a world, in a space where there is all sorts of discussions and accusations and theories around, gender dynamics, also about us as men and how we conduct ourselves and what we do. And what ends up missing in those discussions is love to a degree. It is care. And I want to stay with where you took it, Hugo, because this is me now letting out all sorts of other thoughts that I've had over the years, right? But in staying with what you speak of, that moment on the SS Mendi, or even within these spaces where it's just men and the camaraderie and love and care that exists, what I've questioned is what happened during the dark days of apartheid, and particularly in prisons, and where people are being incarcerated for many, many years. What level of love, camaraderie existed? What level of care existed in those spaces, if at all it did? And how much of the togetherness and looking out for one another challenged the supposed idea of the revolutionary masculine energy, right? And I'm going to stay with you on that.
Yeah. So for me, this idea of an ethic of care, right? That if that is centered in relation, then I might buy into the project of, because I'm the one who's wanting to run away from masculinity, right? But if care is centered and nurtured, then it's a project I might be willing to engage in. And I think that on the question of incarceration, of spaces of enclosure, compulsory enclosure, which is not just imprisonment, but also on the mines, deep underground, in the compounds, in the sugarcane plantations. So Nelson Mandela, 27 years in jail or whatever number on Robben Island, and a relationship to the people around him, right, to Walter Sisulu. And the care that I imagine had to be nurtured in those spaces, right, is something that we don't latch onto post-freedom, right, in our imaginings, because actually what was probably more important in sustaining people through those long enclosures was an ability to care for each other. And that often is taken out of the conversation. And what's centered in the conversation is dominance and ideas of what imagined leadership is, that evacuates what actually sustains and knits together the day-to-day life, is what I'm kind of more interested in. Yeah.
You could argue that the care post-94 disappeared.
Yep.
And that camaraderie that existed at that time and the love that existed at that time that allowed for the push against apartheid is an essence that is missing today, because what we are not seeing is the care, what we are not seeing is the love as well. But I wanna just also a reminder at any point again, if you've got any inputs, questions, put your hand up, feel free. But I wanna talk about, and it's somewhat tied to what you shared, because even in those spaces, Hugo, there's a certain, the incarceration, the mine camps, there's a certain level of, or not even a level, people are stripped of their dignity. So I want to tie the indignity to this broader discussion around masculinity. And maybe, Sipho, coming back to you, this is also somewhat tied to vulnerability, but in one of your pieces, you write from the perspective of a construction worker, the construction worker who is feeling in a particular way at work and is writing a letter to his loved one, not only sharing what's going on, but also expressing love. But in the crux of how he's feeling is the indignity of the workspace and the pain that it causes. So the stripping away of one's dignity and how it impacts on your person. I want to just have you speak to that.
Yeah, on that poem, I don't know if I have to recite it again.
No, don't worry, don't worry.
Okay, on that poem, titled "Another Letter from a Construction Worker." A construction, we know what activities happens there on construction. You must be there on time. If the work starts at 7 o'clock, because sometimes people used to travel, you should be at work around 7:30 to 7. If you start at 7, then there are those times that are called overtimes, you know. You have to be at work more time than usually. Then there is that construction worker who is taking medication at a certain time of a day. At that very same time, his employer wants to see the production. So there is no time to take a medication. And sometimes, like those who are operating big machines like excavators or graders, at this time of a day, you started to work in the morning, you left your medication at home, like the ARVs. Then that construction worker is told maybe at this time at 2 o'clock, that's okay, your machine, its service that is not more needed here, so we'll take you to Eastern Cape right now. So your medication is back at home, yes. Even if you've got a medication that with you, but it's not enough, just imagine from here to Eastern Cape or to Gauteng. with that little medication that you have, you know. If you are on that side, maybe you will not be appearing on their system, meaning that you will not have those medication by that time.
Yeah.
What happens to you, what happens to your body as a construction worker, then possibly you will default, you know. So that poem is basically about that. But coming back to the issue of this masculinity, there's a story that I also want to share. As I've said, that it also sometimes scrape away the pride of a man, as I've said, yes. There was a guy who's was working on in a hotel where we experienced that lockdown through COVID. Then hotels were shut down. Even today, that hotel is not working. Then that guy tried by all the means to find a new job, but unfortunately, he didn't get any. So at home, he has a wife. As a man, you must be a provider, providing your family. You must lead. Even if there are certain decisions that are taken, you must be shown, or you must try by all the means to show that you are the head of the family. Unfortunately, that guy was not working, and his wife had a driver's license. His wife got a work to be a taxi driver. We all know a taxi industry. So he told her husband that I've got a work as a taxi driver. So now I'm going to start driving. Then the man has to, because he was still sitting, staying with his parents by that time. He has to explain that decision taken by his wife to his parents. Yeah. Then his parents say that no. That won't happen. Because the woman should be up at 4 o'clock, and he should be back maybe at 10 at night, a woman, you know. Usually, when we go to work, whereas a woman have to prepare for you a breakfast as a man while you are still asleep. If you will be leaving home at 5 o'clock, she must be up at 4 o'clock. She must go up at 4 o'clock. Even if she's not going to work, she must prepare you a breakfast and a food that will carry to work. Now, it's the woman who's working. Should her husband wake up 2 hours earlier? Her husband will be staying at home with children. Should it be the husband who's preparing everything for children to take them to crèche? You know, when it comes to masculinity, so the man's parents reminded him of all that. You know, so you are the man. Is, as we always say that, sometimes say that the work of or we used to say that the woman's place is in the kitchen. You know, now it's the vice versa.
Let's pause there, because I know a couple of people in the audience who are like, hey, this story. But also again, let's stay there, right? Because there's a couple of things to the story. So there is this supposed gender roles, right? On the one hand, right? So that's one part of it. And then there is the supposed gender roles based on their parents and their upbringing and the way that they see the world, and then in turn them questioning the son. And they're actually calling him out to say, are you a man? What is the man? What is a man in that context, right? And also, one wondering, as the man, are you sitting there feeling emasculated? Or the idea of you are the one waking up to get the kids ready for school, make their lunch. Are you not a parent? Why is that something that would cause any issue whatsoever? And then at the other dynamic of my wife is now working in a male-dominated industry as a taxi driver. Ramon.
No, that's it's all about culture, really, in the end. These are the cultures we grew up with, and they are problematic. Somebody asked a question once somewhere that is culture peer pressure from ancestors or something like that.
Yo, write that down.
It's all that. I remember when I had my first child many, many years ago, I used to spend a lot of time with my daughter. And I used to go to public places, for example, on a Saturday afternoon with her, to a restaurant or something, and I would change her diapers. And people were absolutely shocked. This is how many years ago? Look how old I am. So this is a long time ago, right? And people were absolutely shocked, firstly, that I'm moving around with my little daughter alone, and secondly, that I'm changing her diapers. They just couldn't.
Did you get the question, where's the mother?
Pardon?
Did you get the question, where is the mother?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Inevitably that question
Yeah,
comes,
no.
where's the mother? Or almost like, why isn't this child with the mother? And why is the child with you? You know what I mean? So I think so much of it is about culture. And whether we like it or not, cultures change, and as they should. And they do change. The difficulty is, of course, is understanding, is trying to force change, right? Because I think there's something about culture that's very organic, that cannot be forced, that cannot be, directed in any kind of way. At the same time, I think there are too many hangovers, too many hangovers about what used to be, and that what used to be is right. I remember, again, many years ago, traveling somewhere in South Africa with a colleague, and there were all these big billboards. It's when HIV was sort of first kicking in a big way. There were all these billboards about teaching your children about gender, about sex, and all of that, right? And this guy was totally scandalized that, how could you expect, how should children be taught about sex at school, right? And I asked him the question, well, who should teach children about sex? And he says, grandmothers. I said, okay, fine.
What?
Grandmothers.
Okay.
In a context where kids are being raised, right? Or extended family, right? So the parents, father, mother doing those stereotypical jobs. And grandmothers staying behind with the kids and teaching them about their culture and their traditions and their practice and so on. So this guy says, no, it should be the grandmothers who slowly, over time, teach them about sexuality, sex, and all of that. I said, okay, great. Where is your grandmother? No, she's in the Eastern Cape. Well, finished. The case is done, right? And what I'm trying to say by that is that culture is about context, right? There is a reality where men will not have work and their wives will, right? Yeah, assuming we are, obviously there are different types of family constructs nowadays, than in the past. But there's a context, there's a realities where the woman will be working. And I think that's fine. I think there's a hand there.
Yes, please. Do we have while the mic comes, maybe Hugo, don't forget, this particular subject within Bondo theory, what can you extract from this?
Yeah. So I have neither a wife nor a child. So
You're missing out.
yeah,
Yes.
clearly on a whole
I wouldn't
dose
know,
of masculinity.
except the child part.
So people asked me actually about the book and, not about the book, and said, in Xhosa culture or in Bondo culture, woman, I can immediately envision what a Bondo woman looks like, but I can't think of what a man looks like in popular representation. And Winnie Mandela is from Mbizana, right, raised as a Bondo woman. And where are the men was the question. And for the longest time, that part of the world was a preferred labor reserve for the mines. So men, generations of them, replaced after the father dies in a mine fall, the son goes and replaces him. So many times men were not present in the community. And I was raised by a woman. My father this year will be dead, 40 years. And my mom raised 7 kids. So what I am suggesting is that women are very present also, well, more than men, for many reasons. One of them being that men sometimes run away. Another is that the system consumes men in particular ways, right? So in that context, though, this idea of women occupying roles, gender roles, in particular ways is, so in kind of Mpondo culture, as I would think about it, is that women spread themselves. If you think of the Kolobeni fight against mineral and mining and the tar road, who do you think about?
The women.
Yeah, Nontle is the spokesperson who resists and fights and galvanizes and organizes money and support and maintains that space as unexploited by capitalist production. And I think as young men that I'm no longer, is to learn particular kinds of lessons from that and not to preserve those roles necessarily as for men.
Yeah.
So that we don't fight for space and turf around who it should be. Because actually many of us have models of people doing it differently.
Yeah,
Very right.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Is it working? Hello.
Yeah,
Hi.
Hi.
I'm actually glad that you said that because I recently read Bell Hooks' book, The Will to Change, which I think is probably the most important book written on masculinity, and she wrote that like pre-2000, and it's all men and masculinity and sexuality. And I think one of the most important things she does is she differentiates the difference between patriarchal masculinity and masculinity in itself. And I think patriarchal masculinity is the masculinity you're all speaking about now, but I think what masculinity she looks at is that masculinity is beyond being a man. I think there are a lot of I sit around femme bodies, and I think we're here to also learn about surviving masculinity as a woman, because I embody masculinity myself. I think, another woman embodies masculinity as well, and I don't think masculinity is completely to be a man. And so I'm curious to know, how do you feel about looking at a femme body who holds masculine traits? What are those masculine traits? And then what are positive characteristics, I think, of what Bell Hooks describes as masculinity? Thanks.
It's a very difficult question, but I think you've done something really great. In a sense, you're reinforcing what he said, really, about roles of roles of women as men. But I suppose our subject is also about men as women, right? What is the feminine in males? And I think perhaps in talking about your poetry, which reveals vulnerability and ability to be open about love, is perhaps, although the notion that femininity is love and masculinity is not love is also a misnomer, is also, I think, in my view, incorrect. But I think you're very right. I mean, that we are everything. We are men, women as men, and men as women. I don't know. But I think
Maybe even,
really rich.
I don't know if you're, but I want to maybe question or add a bit more to it, because if you're saying you carry with you masculine energy, what is that energy, right? What is it? Because again, going back to where we started, what is this idea of what masculinity is? And what do you attribute to masculinity or masculine energy that you feel that you carry that with you, what is that?
Good question.
Right? Because again, Ramoholo, like you're saying, so we have this idea of what we assign to what is masculine and feminine, and Hugo's still running, right? And I mean that, I was like, no, but I mean that, right? And running towards what is boundless. And maybe we need to occupy the space of what is boundless, because the minute we try and assign what is masculine, then we say that we carry it with us. Because again, going back to your story about it and what was happening there, that leader, or the energy of Mamuini, are we saying that the energy of Mamuini was masculine? Because she was in the forefront? Because she was leading? Because she was confronting the toxicity of apartheid regime? And is it because she then adopted masculine energy, supposedly, to have the strength, supposedly, to stand in front of and confront those apartheid police and do what she did? What are we saying about her and what she supposedly
What are you saying about so
carried?
many other women who've been warriors all over the world? Right, and legends, women who are legends, including, for example, my brain doesn't work very much anymore. Wakanda, the original Wakanda warriors in West Africa, what were they called? There you go. Please say that louder. There you go. And what?
So what are we saying? And maybe this is where we get to like changing the narrative, right? Hey, we finally arrived. Here we are. No, but seriously, Hugo.
No, so I mean, I think you're also pointing us to, right, what is sex and what is femininity, masculinity, gender, right? So in selecting this panel, would you, for example, have been able to sit here and talk about this topic?
She's saying yes.
And the answer is yes.
I think Bob looks good.
Oh.
I've been able to write an entire book about masculinity. It's very interesting. So,
Yes, but you're also suggesting that it's not evenly spread. It's on a continuum.
Yes.
Masculinity that it's not the preserve of men, and that femininity, right? Also, I'm saying that's also what you're pointing to. Yeah. So who has the authoritative voice to talk about masculinity, and are the various forms of masculinity? And I think we've been tugging at that here too.
And the American situation is really frightening in many senses, the way that they're increasingly de-recognizing the continuum between masculine and feminine, or between gender identities, and are saying simply there's male and female. I think that's very frightening. I take it most of us are aware of that, what is going on in many of the states in America. It's a very sort of conservative drawing back, in a sense, from the freedoms that people have acquired around who they want to be, who they identify themselves as. Although, I don't know, is it absurd at a certain point to say, well, identify as whoever I want to identify as, and that's the end of the story? I know that's the question. Along that continuum.
There's a question over there.
Oh, should I just go? Hi, Tessa Dubs. I wanted to just touch on a point around the idea of emasculation. You mentioned that. Because I was trying to think, what is the feminine alternative to emasculation? And there is none. We don't think of the idea that there's a way in which a woman can be less than feminine, but there's a way in which a man's masculinity can be lessened by what society does. And I think that it points to the kinds of value we place on masculinity that we don't place on femininity. So the thing that you were talking about Mamwini, is that when we see things that are of value, we think they're masculine. Because masculinity is the thing that has value, and to take away that value is to feminize. And that's part of the problem that we have. And for me, what I'd like the panel to reflect on is what pressures that puts on men to deliver in a context where they may not even have the ability to, just based on who they were. Somebody on Twitter wrote something earlier today that I found interesting. It was said in jest, but let's go with it. She said, if you're going to ascribe to the idea that your boyfriend or your partner must lead, then you should perhaps date a partner who's led something before, other than just what you imagine he should lead. But it goes to the idea that society, through masculinity, has put pressure on men to be things that they may not be. And in that sense, the trope that masculinity or patriarchy is as damaging to men as it is to women in many instances is true. So I wanted the panel just to reflect on what does it mean to have to contend with that expectation of value in a context where you may not be able to deliver that.
I mean, I can't deliver on it, so...
Because you don't subscribe.
So I'm defeated.
No, as I've said when we started, in fact, masculinity is not a good thing. It's not a good thing. As I've said that on my definition, it only carries the characteristics of a man, only, as I've said. When you look at what is happening right now, there are males, females, they are in love. There's only one sex that is expected to be providing, to be leading, of which is a man only, He has to build the house, has to buy the car, he has to make sure that he provides everything for his partner. Then there comes the, I don't know if it's a correct word, they call it an LGBTQ, something like that, Whereas people of the same sex get in love together, which is not a bad thing. But if it's a female and a female, because they've grown up in an environment whereby one should be, how can I call it, to be more superior than the other. So they themselves, I've seen some people in my local area of the same sex practicing that. I found a girl hitting another girl, same sex, So now there's an element of, in one of them who seems as if he's playing a role of being a man on her partner, So, yeah, it's something that we have to fight against. As I've said, that it is not something that we have to promote in all the times. As every time when you explain what masculinity is, it seems as if it's only the man who must be dominant on whatever field, at work, in the love, and everywhere, of which, according to me, it's a bad thing. Yeah.
I'm going to participate as a panelist in answering Tessa's question as well, seeing that Hugo has stepped aside. So I think it's a journey, Tessa. It's a journey. I'm, raised Mopedi with a somewhat traditional father, where the dynamics are clear, the roles are clear, the expectations are also clear, where I'm supposed to provide. I am a father, and I'm supposed to do certain things as one of the sons in the family. And I've had to confront those things within the family and within myself as to what are these expectations that I even have placed on myself, including outright being the opposite of what is supposedly a Mopedi man who is traditional and does not attend to his kids. I mean, my son is here somewhere, sleeping. And to go back, that's why I asked you the question, do you ever get asked, where's the mother? Because I'm always with my kids alone. And that's very different from my father. There are times when I look at my father and I think, what were you doing?
All these years.
Because we have 4 kids, I'm the third one, and at some point, my brother being the eldest, we're 3 years apart. So at some point, my mother was handling like 4 kids under the age of 12. And I look at my father in the way that he is, and I ask myself, you seem very uncomfortable in taking on parenting on an active way. So what were you doing at that time when you're uncomfortable to do this? And I'm saying it's a constant journey because there's certain ways that I am, and there's certain expectations that are I have certain expectations of me, of myself, that stem from that upbringing and the culture that I have to constantly confront and unlearn.
I think, if I may, to answer your question sort of kind of directly, I think emasculation, and we're having this debate in another panel yesterday, that one of the, around violence and domestic violence in particular, one of the consequences, I think, of emasculation is violence. Exactly that. That because of the way men are socialized and so on and so forth, once they are emasculated, one of the only ways they can, many of them, one of the ways they resort to that reality is to become violent, to in a sense put that woman back in a place who has the job, who is working, who is providing for this household, which he cannot do. And therefore violence is very often an outcome of that. But I think beyond that, even at the base of all of this, the reasons why men are very often very, very violent is a kind of contextual issue, which sometimes we run away from. And for me, that contextual issue is poverty, right? And I raised this point in the debate we had yesterday around to try and compare, for example, what in your knowledge, and I think we would all agree, what is in our knowledge of the degrees of violence and GBV and so on in a country like Denmark or Sweden, right? Obviously very low, and I don't think we need to do any research to establish that or to agree on that. Compared to South Africa, compared to Brazil, right? And if you were to do I suppose, to make the links, I think it wouldn't be that difficult to say that, look, in certain contexts, there will be violence, and what that context for me is poverty. Now, so at one level, I think we must look to things like poverty to explain our societies and the way they are formed, the way they behave, the way they continue to socialize people, right? Without at the same time exonerating men from their responsibilities vis-a-vis women in particular. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're out of time, but I think also, Tessa, part of your question is also, which we can explore at a different time, is also the point that you made that even the idea of being emasculated, what is that? Because we are attributing a certain position, power, ways to being masculine, and therefore if you are emasculated, it's stripped away, and then does that mean you in turn become feminine, right? And what does that mean as well? There are a lot of questions, but we are out of time. Gents, that was a nice freestyle. I'll be very honest in allowing the conversation to take its own own journey. And
Can I
thank
just
you for
say-
your...
sorry.
Yeah, Mara, you've got 30 seconds. Chief. I'm looking at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah. So I was at this morning's panel on feminism, feminist imaginaries, and it strikes me that because masculinity is so pervasive, right? Everything is ordered around it, that we don't have to spend a whole lot of time thinking about it, because we struggle to articulate what it is, right? Because we don't have to, right? Women often have to think very clearly about the position to take and how to confront patriarchy and deal with it, and therefore the conversation around feminism is often so fluent and eloquent. And you know, like I'm taken off guard. I'm thinking, like, what is it? What is it? What is it? Because I don't have to do it. That thing just serves me. It's in the atmosphere. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to end with Sipho's words. My child, Africa needs you, your young mind that can do miracles. Her dreams cling to you, your strength that can hold them firm. Her glittering future is in you, in your passion that will not die. Will pass on like you, but your great mind will forever live. Thank you very much. A crowded lonely walk, Sipho Banda, Writer's Descape, Hugo Canham, and of course, the three-egg dilemma, Morabo Morojele. Thank you.
Thank you.